I'm Margaret Thornton, born in 1949 in Melbourne's working-class suburbs. When my husband Harold passed away in 2018, my son James became a stranger who happened to share my blood. I felt abandoned by the one person who should have stood by me. But then something happened that changed everything. Today, at 75 and sitting in my modest flat, I'm finally sharing this story because every grandmother deserves to know her worth. Margaret, you're invited to Oliver's 8th birthday party Saturday. Please RSVP, no warmth. No, dear mom, not even James's name at the bottom, just an automated signature from his law firm. I stared at my laptop screen, my arthritic fingers trembling slightly as I reread those sterile words. This was my grandson's birthday invitation, delivered like a business memo. I closed my eyes and let the memories wash over me like a bitter tide. James had always been ambitious, even as a boy. But success had transformed him into someone I barely recognized. When he married Sophia, a stunning blonde from Sydney's eastern suburbs, whose father owned half the harbor, I knew I was being measured against a different standard. At their wedding, I'd worn my best dress, a navy blue number I'd saved for months to buy, only to overhear Sophia's mother whisper to her friends about James's quaint little mother from the suburbs. The housewarming party at their Torak mansion had been worse. I'd brought a hand-knitted throw I'd spent weeks creating, choosing colors I thought would complement their modern decor. Sophia had accepted it with a plastic smile, and I'd later found it folded away in a guest bedroom closet, still with the gift tag attached. Meanwhile, Sophia's mother Victoria had presented them with a crystal chandelier worth more than my monthly pension, receiving effusive thanks and a prominent place in their dining room. When Oliver was born, I'd offered to help with babysitting, eager to be the grandmother I'd always dreamed of being. "That's very kind, Margaret," Sophia had said, her voice honey-sweet but her eyes distant. "But we've hired a wonderful nanny from Switzerland. She has all the proper qualifications." Proper qualifications. As if 40 years of teaching primary school children and raising James meant nothing. As if love couldn't compete with certificates. The years that followed were a masterclass in polite exclusion. Birthday parties where I sat alone while Victoria held court among the other wealthy grandparents. Christmas dinners where conversation flowed around topics I couldn't contribute to, ski trips to Aspen, wine tastings in Tuscany, private school politics. I was the poor relation. Tolerated but never truly welcomed, like a piece of mismatched furniture they couldn't quite bring themselves to throw away. Harold's death had been the final blow. James had attended the funeral, of course, standing stiffly in his expensive suit while I sobbed over the man who'd been my partner for 47 years. But in the months that followed, his visits became phone calls, then texts, then nothing but silence punctuated by obligatory holiday greetings. When I'd called him crying one night, overwhelmed by loneliness and grief, he'd listened for exactly 3 minutes before saying, "Mom, I have to go. Sophia's hosting a dinner party." Now, staring at this birthday invitation, I felt that familiar ache in my chest. The pain of being an afterthought in my own son's life. But something else stirred too, a stubborn spark of determination. Oliver was my grandson, and I'd be damned if I'd let their snobbery keep me from him completely. I typed my RSVP. I'll be there. Looking forward to seeing Oliver. The next few days were spent in careful preparation. I visited the antique shop on Chapel Street, where Mrs. Chen helped me select a beautiful naturalist's field kit. A leather-bound collection of magnifying glasses, specimen bottles, and field guides that had belonged to a Victorian-era explorer. For a curious mind, she'd said with a knowing smile. It cost me nearly 2 weeks' pension, but seeing Oliver's eyes light up would be worth every penny. Saturday arrived gray and drizzling, matching my mood perfectly. I took the tram to Torak, my gift carefully wrapped in brown paper and tied with twine. Simple but elegant, I hoped. The house loomed before me, all glass and steel and intimidating angles. So different from the cozy brick home where James had grown up. Cars lined the circular driveway, BMWs, Mercedes, a Porsche that probably cost more than I'd earned in 5 years of teaching. Inside, the party was in full swing. Children in designer clothes played carefully supervised games while their parents sipped champagne and discussed property prices. I spotted Oliver immediately. Harold's eyes and James's jaw, but with Sophia's golden hair. He was polite when I gave him his gift, but distracted, already moving on to the next present before I could explain what made this one special. Margaret. Sophia appeared at my elbow, resplendent in a dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent. How lovely that you could make it. Victoria was just asking about you. She gestured toward the kitchen island where Victoria held court, surrounded by other perfectly coiffed grandmothers. I approached hesitantly, but their conversation about their grandchildren's private tutors and overseas holidays made it clear I had nothing to contribute. I found myself standing alone by the floor-to-ceiling windows watching the children play in the manicured garden while their parents networked around me. This was my family, but I felt like a ghost haunting someone else's life. James finally approached me as I stood by those imposing windows, his face wearing the expression I'd come to know so well, polite but distant, like he was greeting a colleague's elderly aunt rather than his own mother. "Mom, thanks for coming," he said, glancing around to ensure none of his important guests were watching our interaction. "Of course I came, James. He's my grandson." The words came out sharper than I'd intended, years of hurt bleeding through my careful composure. His jaw tightened. "Look, I appreciate the effort, but you have to understand. This isn't really your crowd. These people, they're important for my career, for Oliver's future. Sophia's worked hard to build these relationships. And where exactly do I fit into Oliver's future?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper but carrying the weight of every snub, every exclusion, every lonely evening I'd spent wondering what I'd done wrong. James ran his hand through his hair, a gesture I remembered from his childhood when he was caught in a lie. "You don't, Mom." "Not really. This invitation was just for appearances. Sophia thought it would look bad if we didn't invite you, but honestly, you don't belong in this world. You never have." The words hit me like a physical blow. I'd suspected it, felt it in every awkward interaction, but hearing it spoken aloud by my own son was devastating. Without another word, I gathered my handbag and walked out, leaving behind the sound of children's laughter and adult conversation that had never included me anyway. That night, I sat in my small flat surrounded by photos of James as a boy, gap-toothed grins, school plays, the proud moment when he'd graduated law school. Where had I lost him? When did love become insufficient? The phone rang at 6 the next morning, jarring me from restless sleep. James's voice was frantic, stripped of its usual controlled composure. "Mum, Oliver's missing. He's been gone since last night. We think he might have heard us arguing after you left." Sophia found his bedroom window open. My heart stopped. "What do you mean missing? Has run away? The police are searching, but..." His voice cracked. "Mum, I think this is my fault. After you left, Sophia and I had a fight about what I said to you. Oliver must have heard everything. He asked about you at breakfast yesterday, wanting to know why you never visit anymore." I was already reaching for my clothes. "I'm coming over." "No, Mom, you don't understand. We've got search teams." "The police." "James Oliver Thornton," I said, using his full name the way I had when he was 8 and in trouble. "That little boy is my grandson, and I'm coming to help find him." The next 6 hours were the longest of my life. I joined the search parties, combing through Turak's manicured streets, calling Oliver's name until my voice was hoarse. Sophia was a wreck, her perfect composure finally cracked, mascara streaking down her cheeks as she clutched James's arm. Even Victoria had arrived, looking genuinely frightened for perhaps the first time since I'd known her. It was nearly sunset when I had a thought. "James, does Oliver know where I live?" "Maybe. We drove past your street once when he asked about Grandma Margaret's house." My heart began to race. "The park near my flat, there's bushland behind it. He loves nature, doesn't he? That field kit I gave him yesterday." We drove to my neighborhood in James's BMW, so out of place among the modest weatherboard houses and small front gardens. The park was empty except for a few dog walkers, but the bushland beyond was dense with eucalyptus and wattle trees. I called Oliver's name, and somewhere in the gathering dusk, I heard a small voice answer. We found him huddled beneath a large gum tree, clutching the magnifying glass from his birthday gift. His school clothes were torn and dirty, but his eyes were bright with adventure despite his tears. "Grandma Margaret," he cried, launching himself into my arms. "I was trying to find your house, but I got lost. I wanted to ask you about the bugs I found." James knelt beside us, his own eyes wet with tears I hadn't seen since Harold's funeral. "Oliver, mate, you scared us so much. Why did you run away?" "Because you said Grandma Margaret doesn't belong with us," Oliver said with the devastating honesty of childhood. "But she gave me the best present, and she knows about nature stuff, and she smells like cookies and hugs. Why doesn't she belong?" James looked at me over Oliver's head, and for a moment, I saw my little boy again. The one who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms, who'd cried when his pet goldfish died, who'd once told me I was the smartest person in the world. She does belong, mate. I was wrong. Very, very wrong. The weeks that followed brought changes I'd never expected. James called regularly, not out of duty, but because he wanted to. Oliver spent Saturday afternoons with me, exploring the local park with his field kit, collecting leaves and learning about native birds. Sophia, perhaps shaken by how close they'd come to losing their son, began including me in family dinners, not the formal affairs with their wealthy friends, but quiet Sunday roasts where Oliver would chatter about his discoveries and James would actually listen to my stories about his childhood. I also began building a life that didn't revolve around waiting for their approval. I volunteered at the local library, reading to children whose eyes lit up the same way Oliver's did when I told them about the adventures hidden in books. I joined a community garden where my teaching skills proved invaluable in showing young families how to nurture growing things. Most importantly, I stopped measuring my worth by their acceptance. I was Margaret Thornton, a woman who had raised a successful son, taught hundreds of children to read, loved a good man for nearly 50 years, and survived his loss with grace. I was a grandmother who knew the names of birds and the secrets of making perfect Anzac biscuits. I was enough, with or without their recognition. 3 months after Oliver's disappearance, James knocked on my door on a Tuesday evening. Not a scheduled visit. Not a family obligation, just my son, holding a bottle of wine and wearing an expression I remembered from his childhood when he needed to confess something important. "I owe you more than an apology, Mom," he said as we sat in my small living room, the space that had once seemed so inadequate compared to his mansion but now felt warm and welcoming. I lost sight of what mattered. I was so busy trying to fit into Sophia's world that I forgot where I came from. "I forgot you." "You didn't forget me, James," I said, reaching across to squeeze his hand. "You just stopped seeing me clearly. Success has a way of distorting our vision sometimes." He nodded, tears threatening. "Oliver asks about his other grandfather now, Harold. He wants to know what Dad was like, what you and Dad did together." I realized I've been denying him half his heritage because I was ashamed of being ordinary. There's nothing ordinary about love, James. There's nothing ordinary about family. The extraordinary lies in showing up, in being present, in choosing each other again and again. We talked until nearly midnight, bridging years of distance with honesty and finally understanding. When he left, he hugged me the way he used to as a boy, fiercely, completely, as if he never wanted to let go. "You belong, Mom," he whispered against my shoulder. "You've always belonged." I'm sorry it took me so long to remember that. As I watched his car disappear down my modest street, I smiled. I had spent years trying to earn my place in their world, when what I should have been doing was inviting them into mine. A world where love mattered more than money, where stories were more valuable than status, where a grandmother's embrace could heal wounds that expensive gifts never could. Oliver's field kit sits on my kitchen table now, next to a jar of beetles he collected last Saturday and a drawing he made of the two of us discovering a family of possums in the park. Tomorrow, he's coming over to help me plant herbs in the community garden, and James is joining us. Not because Sophia thinks it's appropriate, but because he genuinely wants to learn about the things that make his son's eyes shine.